You are tuned in to Kids
In the Pit!
Hey guys, it's Gabe from the Kids in the Pit podcast. Today I'm joined by Pat Flynn from Half Heart and Fiddlehead. Thanks so much for letting me interview you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, what do you do in what do you do in Half Heart and Fiddlehead?
Um, I guess I'm the singer and the lyricist, and in both projects, uh, it's always been very much so a collaborative effort um, in songwriting. However, I really don't play an instrument. I never have. My story kind of goes like this. The first band practice I ever had was when I was 13 or 14. And I went upstairs to go to none of my friends really knew how to play an instrument. I went upstairs to go to the bathroom. And then when I came back down, they had already assigned who would be responsible for which instrument. And I was assigned the position of singer, uh, which I was like, all right, that's fine. And then that little band broke up. Um, and it kind of continued on with some other people. And because I had been the singer for this previous act, I they were like, "Oh, well, you have experience," so I became the singer of the next one, and it kind of just snowballed. But then, um, it was easy to be really bad at an instrument when you're 14 and you're playing with other 14-year-olds. And there was just sort of something socially awkward about being 19 and bad at an instrument and playing with other people who are bad at their instruments. But most 19-year-olds, at least in my time, had some proficiency with an instrument. Um, and so I kind of missed this boat at sucking at playing guitar or drums or bass with people who equally sucked. So I wouldn't stand out as being like the really bad musician. So I missed my boat. But uh, you know, I just kind of stayed on the path of like being the singer, and I decided that, well, if I'm gonna be the singer, I'm gonna really try and make the lyrics really count and be super compelling, because I'm not really contributing to the actual creation of like the riffs or anything like that. It also pushed me to be a little bit more conscientious and involved in the songwriting process and making sure that certain parts would adhere to what I was like envisioning for the lyrics. So that that's kind of my story of how I've become what I do in the bands that I've done. It's I guess I'm the singer and lyricist, but in terms of songwriting, any project I do, it's with the exception of one project that I have called Wolf Whistle. I really I'm pretty involved in the process, and I like it that way. And the people I work with really appreciate getting the lyricist's vision on it. I also know when to back out when I'm not wanted, and when my idea that is without a skill of how to play a riff or an instrument is would get in the way. So that's a very long-winded way of explaining what I do.
So since you sung in that band, and my parents met at a Half Heart show, so if you were assigned a different instrument, would I be alive?
um, that's a good That's a good question, which in the world of history we call the counterfactual. And kind of imagining the what if this hadn't happened, would this still have happened? You know, I don't know. I know that Have Heart would not be what it was if I wasn't singing, and it wouldn't have been what it was if the guitarist Ryan Hudon wasn't the guitarist. It just would have been a different thing. And you have all these little tiny elements that likely, we don't know for sure, but likely would have changed the trajectory of everything. Like, what if Ryan Hudon was the lyricist and I was the guitarist? What would have the riffs kind of sounded like? It? I think that it kind of speaks to the interesting way in which this little world of uh, punk music kind of creates things, like contributes to the creation of things, like human beings. I have a friend who um I met in Australia, and because we met in Australia, I met her through a friend of hers. We became friendly, and she decided that she wanted to do some school in Boston, so she came to Boston and ended up meeting another friend of mine, and they ended up getting married and having two kids. But if you take Havard out of the equation, there's no cross-continental romance and a family in existence. So I think that in the causal equation, I might be an indirect causal factor in the development of your life. So I think that that's pretty fascinating and a little mind-blowing on my part.
Yep. So for those watching, my parents found this like picture of the night that they met at your show in 2007. There so there's hard to do it inverted. There's you, there's my dad, and can't really see it because it's really dark, but there's my mom.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
It, it it's hard to process that, and again, I just think it kind of speaks to the power of music and a little bit of community, and the interesting nature of what punk the culture around punk music has. I can't really speak to other communities, but like um, you know other musical genres and the culture community surrounding them. But I just I wouldn't be surprised to learn that hardcore has a special kind of ability to generate these unlikely encounters between people that go on to create life.
Yeah. So what year did Half Heart start? And what year did Fiddlehead start?
Have Art started the summer that I was turning 17. So I was 16 in the summer of 2002. I went to a show in Boston one night that not many people were at. This band called Stay Gold from Seattle, Washington played.
Heard of them.
Yeah, yeah, I was a bit of a fan. They had the kind of like a melodic tinge to them, but they were extremely talented and lyrically, musically, and but I was from Massachusetts, and the big kind of reigning sound and scene was the Boston straight edge and Boston hardcore sound, and this band called 10 Yard Fight, and this other band In My Eyes and Reach the Sky. They were um, kind of a similar, like, little bit more straightforward sound. But then there was this band called Bane from Massachusetts, which had I think a little slightly more involved, uh, technical and at times melodic, but at times like really heavy sound. And for me, kind of the goal was to kind of, because the musicianship was lacking, to sound like a band like Stay Gold, who in my interpretation was kind of like modeling their sound off of this band from New Jersey called Turning Point. I wanted to desperately have the chops to sound like that, but I'm kind of en route there, learn some skills and writing. So we started in the summer of 2002. The drummer really didn't know how to play drums, and so I remember one time teaching him how to play drums, um, and I don't know how to play drums. And we started in that summer of 2002 when I was 16, just about to turn 17. Um, and then we played our first show a whole year later. It took about a year to actually kind of get to the point where we could play a show. Our demo wasn't even out. And then that band, Have Art, broke up in 2009. And around 2012, I had decided to start Fiddlehead with my good friend Alex Dow, who I was living in an apartment with in Boston, and we were. He had just played a really somber riff, and I was like, "Oh, I really like that, man. We should just do a band that's just like, a little more melodic and just kind of undeterred or untethered from the traditional confines of what hardcore was expecting. So we were a little more melodic, which I appreciated as kind of caught on some of the emotions that I wanted just captured in sound. So that started in 2012. So basically 10 years after Half Our had started, and Fiddlehead is still pumping. I want to say 2000, if not 2012, in 2013 we started, but I think 2012 sounds right. And so we're three LPs in, and you never know with Fiddlehead because the band was really very much so not intended to even play live, and so we kind of just go where the wind brings us, and people are living across the country now, so it's kind of hard to get together. But it's been a nice ride over the last few years.
Yeah, I'll see. I guess I'll see Fiddlehead at Furnace Fest. You guys are playing there.
Sure are, yeah. I'm looking forward to getting back to Birmingham. It's a nice city. Last time we were there, I got to check out the Birmingham jail where Martin Luther King Jr. wrote his famous letter on a napkin called "A Letter from a Birmingham Jail," and so I got to I got to explore there.
That was in Birmingham. That's cool.
Yeah.
Um. Okay, so since you brought up Bane, I watched the Bane documentary, and it said you wrote part of the lyrics and sang on my favorite Bane song, "Calling Hours." How was that?
Oh, that was great. That was a very intense experience, I would say, because I grew up really worshiping Bane, and I'm talking like cult like worshiping. I was just obsessed with them. I thought that they were so rare and unique from anything I had learned about thus far with the kind of discovering punk music, and and the varieties of hardcore. I I had really kind of started out listening to uh, kind of like uh, I think what it was is I was super into my little kind of musical pipeline to Bane, and I think why they were so attractive to me has a lot to do with the music that my brother and sister were into. So my brother was very much so attracted to very discordant, very uh, undigestible music from bands like Scratch Acid, a band like Mudhoney, um, just some of like the Seattle Northwestern kind of grunge stuff. And my sister was really attracted to kind of pretty sounding, but like like not really typical music that would be played on the radio, but was just identifiably good and with a strong melodic tone to it. And so I think that these two kind of dark worlds of like undigestible and beautiful melody were kind of always circling in my brain. And I like all they had in common that they weren't really accepted by the mainstream world. So I ended up kind of discovering like at the time, like metal was like really huge. And I went towards that. I was like, there was like the rise of like kind of like bands like Korn and Deftones. I thought were very awesome and appealing. But there was something silly about it all. It felt like lyrically purposeless and quite frankly kind of immature and stupid. And below my middle school intellect. Not that I was some type of snob, but I was just like, I feel stupid listening to this because my brother who listened to like Sonic Youth and Fugazi, and like my sister was listening to Bell and Sebastian and Yola Tango. I just felt kind of, I don't know, unsophisticated, really immature around while listening to that. So I was kind of looking for something a little bit more serious, and not that this was something that was a little more serious, but Blink 182 had put out a song called Damn It. And I liked the idea of someone singing about what it's like to um, like grow up. That song was attractive to me. And then I was also getting into like skateboarding culture, and I noticed they kind of looked like the skaters. And so I got into that, but then I just found the world of like kind of punk music, and I dove really deep, and I wanted to find things that were my own. And I found this band called Crass that was extremely serious sounding, and I had been learning about history at school, and I noticed that some of the things they were talking about were some of the things that my history teacher, Mr. Hall, was talking about. They had this one called Shaved Women, which was about how when France was liberated from the Nazis, one of the first things that the men did was they dragged out French women who were suspected of collaborating with the Nazis for the last few years while the Nazis had taken over France, and they shaved their heads in public, and it just seemed like the height of like complexity and this story, and I, learning about it at school, and then I see it in this song, and I remember their phrase, there is no authority but yourself, and I just sort of thought, man, oh man, this band is incredibly serious. And so I saw this like element of like punk music as being something that could be very serious. But then I discovered Minor Threat, and that spoke to me because I was a little bit, it was hard for me to relate with these very deeply complex political histories because
Yeah.
I was 14. Um, so uh, anyway, somewhere in the mix of discordant sounding, discordant imagery, and a love for like kind of a slightly melodic tone, but something a little bit more relatable, really kind of brought me to discover Bane. And because they just kind of checked all the boxes. There was seriousness, it was light, there was oftentimes lightheartedness, but it was deeply almost violent at times in terms of the lyrical messaging, or anti-violent, I would say. But their 7 inch Holding This Moment really spoke to me, especially the song Both Guns Blazing.
So,
And I noticed on the back of it was a line from an E. E. Cummings poem, and I only knew E. E. Cummings because my father, who taught English and poetry, was a fan. So I dove deep into that, and I just was so unbelievably struck by the lyrical prowess of Aaron Bedard. He was basically writing what I thought, what I was interpreting correctly as poetry. And I remember reading poems like from Elizabeth Barrett Browning, where she's mentioning talking about counting the waves and being like, "Oh, that's like a phrasing in Count Me Out by Bane." And I remember just really feeling like I had found something that was actually giving me a good struggle and challenge to develop my brain.
yeah.
Um, and so and as someone who didn't play an instrument and was trying to really contribute meaningfully to the music process and try to move away from the less obvious and stereotypical stuff, I really looked to Aaron Bedard's lyrics as a way to see how I can offer something a little bit less stock, a little less obvious, less generic. And I started Half Heart, and we ended up playing together, and we become friends. And then suddenly, I find myself in, I think, roughly 2011 or 12 when they started writing what was going to be their last LP. And Bedard hits me up and saying like, we're looking to write a song that is kind of about the process of like saying goodbye to something. And he had asked me to write my own lyrics on a Bane song. So I was just deeply mortified. I was struck with pressure, but luckily I had been part of a culture that always seemed really supportive of me in my artistic endeavors, and I somehow found the courage to actually just write lyrics on a Bane record. And I remember writing the lyrics, going in my room in Boston, the apartment I was living in at the time, and I turned all the lights off. I made sure everyone was gone, and I had multiple speakers, and I was just blasting the musical track to it. I had like a I had like a strobe light for some reason in that house. It was like the black flashing black and white, and I just tried to completely lose myself in the moment, and around this concept of what it means to say goodbye to something. And I chose to write about um, kind of the fear of the day after. you say goodbye to something. Not so much the process of saying goodbye, but really like what is it like the day after? Um, you've already said the goodbyes. What has continued and what has changed? That was what I was writing about, and it was all in the spirit of the emotional intensity that Bain had always brought to the table. And I think to this day, it is the best stanza of lyrics I've ever written in my entire life, and I don't think that I would have ever been able to do that had it not been for the type of environment and atmosphere that Bain had always brought whenever they played. Yeah, it was just something, uh, smash into reality. Any type of norm of how you should start a show or be at a show, it was just thrown out. It really just made hardcore seem like something that is truly not not something that happens online, not something that just happens on the in public discourse, but something that like really its actual reality exists in the live moment. And yeah, so that's my extremely long-winded answer to your question.
Also, you've probably saw me yawn a few times. I promise I'm not bored. I just, for some reason, just my body yawns so much. I don't know why.
No, don't worry about that, buddy. You're growing up. That's the process.
Also, so when you yawn, it's actually not you being tired. It's actually your brain trying to like take in oxygen because there's too little or something because that's why it like sucks in so much air.
I'm gonna start breathing deeper as a
Oh,
result of
like your nose a lot. Okay, I'll just breathe like this.
it.
I'll do this the whole episode. Kidding. Um, that yeah, at the Bane reunion show last June, they let me sing. Wait, so where was your part at? Which one
My
is it?
part happens right before Walter's part. So
Okay,
right,
so Walters is like the rappy one, right?
That's what you did.
Okay.
yeah.
So at the Bane reunion show last June, they let me sing Walt's part of Calling Hours on stage with them, and it was really awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I saw the video. You got crushed.
Yeah.
You got slammed.
I got it
His
back.
head got knocked off.
And also so for the for like the best give you the loudest F and echo, I lost the mic, like it just got ripped out because a stage diver must have like uh pulled it with him or something, and then it just boop gone.
That's how it rolls. You gotta watch out. Sometimes I feel like when I'm playing, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Matrix, but there's this scene where the main character played by Keanu Reeves like dodges 1,000 bullets. Sometimes I've found myself kind of feeling like this like shadow boxing, Matrix warrior dodging people. I'm pretty good at not getting slammed.
Yeah.
It's an acquired skill, I would say.
So do you have a favorite song from either of your two bands to perform live?
Oh, that's a good question. Huh. Uh, yeah, favorites. You got to pick one. I'm very happy that with the way in which satisfied with the way in which both of those bands have chosen to write songs. It's always been, about giving the listener something to enjoy, wherever, whether they're in their car, exercising, but with a special consideration of what it means to hear it live. Knowing that it's in this punk world where anything can go live. Um, so I think with How Heart, it is probably the song "Watch Me Rise," uh, because I've just seen. I almost like always like lose myself in the moment whenever we've played that song because I mean it's never asked for, but the crowd tends to take the stage, and I'm really satisfied with those lyrics, and it feels like when we play it like something very intensely meditative on the importance of endurance, uh, uh, persistence, and really kind of uh, really what William Faulkner talked about it as Nobel Peace Prize speech, the human condition's willingness to endure. Um, that is exactly the spirit that I wanted that song to have, and the fact that it could connect with people is matters a whole lot. And it's perfectly tied. I can't pick the one. It's perfectly tied with our other song called Boston's, which is a song I never would have imagined to lyrically connect with people because it felt like a very complex topic. Uh, Essentially, the song is about like privilege, which has become kind of a buzzword these days. But like at the time, this was in 2007, and I was looking around at a hardcore scene, and I was seeing a lot of bands really trying hard to be hard and to try and like have this kind of like self-made man type of idea where the world owes them. And to me, it dawned on me. I just grew up with this feeling like I owe things to people, like my father, and his struggles coming out of poverty, and my father's father and his struggles with alcoholism, um, and having that all kind of wrap up around me and building a life that I felt like I earned through the ways in which the people before me had struggled. And I remember telling my friend Joe that I was trying to write a song about this. We were like both like going to sleep. We were in like a college dorm, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember him just going, that sounds like a really complex thing to write about." And I was like, "I know," but I pulled it off. And I have fond memories of writing that song. And I'd walk up and down the street of Louis Pasteur Avenue between the college I went to and the high school my father went to. Um, and I feel like I nailed it, and it was a really important concept. And so when a larger group of people really connect to it, it kind of, I don't know, it gives me a little bit of confidence and faith that that we as a species do care about complex things, and it's not always just about partying and the mosh calls, which are cool and have their place, but there is a place and a desire and an appetite for serious stuff. So that's a tie. It's hard to really distinguish the gratification that comes with playing those songs live. Uh, with Fiddlehead, you I think that some of my favorite songs to play with Fiddlehead. It's tough. I really love our most recent record, probably the most at this point. Um, there's a song on it called Queen of Limerick, which is probably like the most intense song Fiddlehead has ever played. And it's extremely tiring as well. Um, but that song really kind of explodes in the listener's face, and I think there's just such rawness, and I feel like I can really just like unleash and exercise all the demons when we play that song. And that one's that'll be tied with this other song we have called Widow in the Sunlight, um, which whenever we play, we don't play it that often, but when we play it, it always just feels like extremely cathartic. um, and yeah, yeah, and kind of like redemptive. So those, I can't pick the one, but those are probably the top four.
Nice. I'll listen to all four of those songs after the interview's done. And I'll read through the lyrics.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah. So, what was the first punk or hardcore show you attended, and how old were you?
So I was 13 turning 14 when I went to this thing called Warp Tour. And I I actually like shudder to even want to call that a punk or hardcore show because it really, to me, when I got there, I was excited to go because I was like obsessed with punk and it was thought of as like the punk fest. But I got there and man, parents dropped me off and I was almost immediately dislocated from my friends. Like I went with my buddy Eddie and my other buddy Corey, and it was a birthday gift. My parents just drove us like 2 hours. It was in Western Mass at the time. They dropped us off, and it was so huge, and I'll never forget it. Like I was excited to be there with my friends, but because it was so big, we actually just lost each other. No one had cell phones at the time, so I didn't know where they were, and I couldn't find them. I kept looking for them, and I was like, where are they? And so I spent the day essentially by myself. And I remember being thirsty, being outside, and I wanted to go get a bottle of water or drink, and I didn't have enough money. Like I didn't come up with, I didn't grow up with money, and I didn't have enough money. If I wanted to buy a T-shirt from one of my favorite bands, I had to choose between surviving and getting a fucking bottle of water. Sorry to swear. So like I was like, I remember just I wasn't fully aware of how that seemed lame to me. But I just remember feeling like, I just this reminds me of like going to the hockey pro shop. I played hockey when I was a kid and remember just all the nice gear was really expensive
Yeah.
and I couldn't afford it. And that bothered me. And then I remember watching um uh I remember watching, who was it? Suicidal Tendencies played. And I was like, I was familiar with them. I had like this discography from Suicidal Tendencies. Um, and I remember watching and I was watching them from afar. Like I couldn't really get close. And then like Pennywise played. I was really excited to see Pennywise, but like again, I was like, I can't. This doesn't feel like what I imagined. This like raw, kind of intimate. Like I'm close and like I can get a mic pass. You know, the singer's going to give me the microphone, and
Yeah.
couldn't get that. Uh, and it just felt so distant, and everyone looked so small, and no one seemed to be like together, and but they were all there. And then I remember Blink 182 played, and I remember just thinking like, oh God, like I couldn't breathe. I just felt like I was like I wasn't an individual, and I was like stuck in this like colossal. I was like, I'm gonna die, and so like I tried to like basically get some air by crowd surfing, and then I just got like thrown to the back. And I remember thinking like, oh, you know, like this is exciting, but like there was just no sense of individuality there. And to me, that was what was really attractive about you know punk culture. But I felt like I was at like a festival fairgrounds, and
Yeah.
that didn't seem like punk to me. Um, and so in my area where I grew up in, outside of Boston, this place called New Bedford, um, there was a venue that would do punk shows. It was called Reflections, and it was during the day. It was an AA hall for people struggling with uh, alcoholism. They could go and meet, and at night they would turn it into a place where like teenagers like myself could just book a show. And I went, and it was this band called The Products, who had just been changing their name to Beyond Authority, um, playing. They opened it, and the singer had this like leather jacket with spikes on it, and a self-made jacket that said the Freeze on the back, and he had like a DRI symbol. And I didn't know who these bands were. I was like, this is cool, but like the room was truly the size of like you could maybe like it was a very small size. The legal capacity probably would have been like 50 people. And I think that at the show, as the night went on, there was roughly around like 250 people fitting in a room that was really intended to only fit 50 people. So it got bigger and bigger. And then, but the band that played after the for opening band was a melodic kind of like emotionally driven, somber sounding band. And I remember the guitarist was wearing a sweater, and the singer kind of looked almost just like a hockey coach with like a big goatee. They were called uh, I remember the other guitars had like, like thick rimmed glasses, and I just remember like everyone looking like themselves. No one just kind of looked like everyone was just kind of doing their own. They were sweaters, punk jackets. There were like skinheads there, and like, um, and then there was me, and I remember just thinking like, oh, I don't have to look a certain way. There's no code here, and I really enjoyed that. And then this band, All Chrome, which was a local band, was headlining. I'd heard All Chrome this, All Chrome this, All Chrome this, and I was like, I've never heard of All Chrome. They're not on Epitaph Records and not on Fat Records. They didn't play Warped Tour, so they must not be a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, they were a massive deal. And I remember when they played, I had never even heard them. And the whole room, it was like 250 plus people. They were all singing along to this. I remember they turned the lights off and it's just like this one green light. The fact that they turned the lights on, they clearly brought their own light. So this kind of do it yourself attitude was translating to me. And oh my God, like everyone was going nuts. And I just was so inspired by that because I felt no pressure to um, like look a certain way. Um, People were giving out demos. There was a soda machine for like $1 that I could buy in the back. You know, it just seemed like people were communicating across, fashion lines. There was no clickiness at this, and what I was interpreting was like the hardcore scene, and it was devoid of this kind of commercial, um, hot topic store, branch, just in the form of like a traveling festival. So that was uh, my first punk and hardcore show, and I remember this band called Gray Area played, and they said like, oh, this is members of Warzone, and I'd heard of Warzone, but they sounded nothing like Warzone. They sounded like really, they had like a melodic sound to them and very aerial. So there was just such a musical range the whole night, and that really has colored to this day my understanding of what I think hardcore is. There's really no code. It's more about this kind of spirit of collectivity, but also individuality. And I know that sounds super vague, but like I think to me, it's always been about riding that fine line between both.
Yep. So you mentioned DRI. This is my punk vest, and there's I
Oh,
can't,
nice.
I don't know if it's on screen well, but um, yeah. So this was from my mom's old DRI shirt that didn't fit her anymore, and she got it from her brother who liked DRI, and he
Yeah,
got the shirt at a DRI show in the 90s.
yeah. Well,
Now,
DRI, yeah, and now it's yours. It's on your jacket.
yep, this is my I got
We turned it into like a backpack. Cut
Oh,
up shirt and made
yeah,
it a
it
backpack.
was like a shirt and it had like
So you got mine for it.
where? Oh yeah,
nice.
a pin. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. DRI, I think, is a little understated because they were famous for crossover. They were kind of branching punk and hardcore into the world of metal, and again, to me, it's this idea that like these lines, whether they be about genre, music genre, race, ethnicity, belief, like they were just, you know, crossing over. They had kind of like done like a smash up, and so I've always appreciated anybody who looks at the way things are, and like how some people say like they should be, and then imagines how the way that they could be. That's been kind of like a leading ethos in my mind, to kind of look out at how something is and say, just because it is that way now doesn't mean it can't be a different way. And I think that bands like DRI, bands like Rites of Spring, um, have like kind of been they were the pioneers of just like helping hardcore not get stuck in this like genre specific thing that just kind of rips out the feeling of creativity. It kind of creates these walls of like of thought and imagination that I can't stand.
Yep. Um So what is your favorite what I can't speak right now. Okay. What is your favorite place in the world you've toured in?
Um, I think thus far, um, I would say it's a toss-up between Jakarta in Indonesia, where I've been twice now,
That's pretty
and
pretty good.
yeah, it's pretty far, and awesome. And then I would say like South America as a whole, but like Chile, Santiago in Chile. It's just times I were there. It's the hospitality, it's the intensity, it's the feeling of community building that I've seen in those places that remind me of you know kind of the stuff I saw in the late '90s when I was just getting into punk and hardcore. Um, I've really those are probably the places that stand out the most to me in terms of wanting to go back to one day if I ever could. I've been to a lot of places. I've been very lucky for that. China was really unbelievable to go to. I think I'd want to go back to China um, to play just to kind of see where it's at and how it's changed over time, or in terms of like punk music. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be cool to go to Indonesia or China. I did go to Japan in January, which was really cool.
Oh, nice. I mean, Japan's great too. It's one of the the most shocking uh, culture shocks I've ever encountered. It's just a completely different culture. Just so, just behavior wise, just totally foreign to anything that I've ever encountered on the earth. It's just a very like, and yeah, I felt like I was in another world when I was there.
Yep. Yeah, I saw Sick of It All play two shows there,
Oh,
and
nice.
like stage divers there are just so good. They're just they like flip over the crowd onto the stage. It's nuts.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that. I'll have to when I go if I ever go back, I'll give a special closer look at the
Yeah.
stage dive.
So have you played the venue, the Anti Knock?
The anti-knock. I
It's
don't
in
think I don't think so. Where is that?
Shinjuku in Tokyo.
Oh, we've played Shinjuku.
So it might have been there. It was a small club. It was like maybe I don't know, maybe so do you know the Auto Bar in Baltimore?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's probably about the size of that.
nice. Um, where we would Shinjuku is in that's like a part of Tokyo, right?
It's in Tokyo. Because
Yeah,
Tokyo has a ton of parts. There's Shibuya, um there's Shinjuku. Why am I blanking on the rest?
Shibuya?
Yeah, that's what I said.
No, I don't know the rest.
I can I'm blanking on the others, but the only ones I can think of right now are Shinjuku and Shibuya.
yeah. Shinjuku. We would almost always and exclusively, even with Fiddlehead, when Fiddlehead went back last summer, ACB is where we would play. I'm told it's like the CBGBs of Tokyo. It's just been around forever. Very small club, but it's got some hallowed ground in terms of like who's played there. And yeah, it was great. It was totally excellent.
Nice. Um, so okay. So what is okay? Why am I doing this? My brain isn't working. Okay, what is your favorite food from another country?
Oh, that's a good question. So I actually have a slightly alternative take to this. So um, I love food. I love good food. Um, and I'm always happy to eat anything that is, created and made
Yeah.
with like extreme care and intensity. However, I am not, I'm typically always surrounded by someone who would self identify as a foodie and like someone who's like a student of like where to go and what to eat in a specific location. And so I've always kind of said, you know what, in my musical projects, or which is really the main way of my travels, I've always said, I'm going to let the foodie in the band kind of decide for us, and I'll just enjoy it. And that tends to work. Um, and it saves me a lot of time of like research. Uh, so what I also find fascinating though is the element of like global capitalism. And what I mean by that is, as someone who's more in the world of like history and political science, I'm always a little bit curious about what like American corporations and their food tastes like in other parts of the world. Is it different? Do they bring their own kind of cultural flavor to it? And so when Have Art was globetrotting for the time in which we were, a full-time band, I made it a point to try KFC on any continent that served it. And much to the annoyance of the people I was with, I said, "Hey, listen, I understand that we're trying to see Red Square right now, but I am told that right down the street in the mile the opposite direction here in Moscow is a KFC. I need to know how the former Soviet Union serves KFC." And so I, inconvenienced everybody, went to the KFC, only to discover that, tastes exactly like it's served in Boston, Massachusetts. So I remember being in Johannesburg, South Africa, asking them to, detour because I saw the symbol of the Colonel down the street, and I had them detour, bring me to the KFC in Johannesburg, South Africa, just to taste it and to verify it tastes exactly like it tastes
Yeah.
in Louisville, Kentucky. So like I've been to KFC in China, I've been to KFC throughout South America. It all tastes the same. Now we might say, well, duh, of course it would, but how would you know if you hadn't actually tried it? So I am living proof and evidence of how of the fact that KFC across the world just tastes like KFC.
Yeah, I had KFC in Prague, Czechia. So it was I don't think they had it in America, but it was some sort of like chicken sandwich with like barbecue stuff sauce and stuff on it. It was very American.
It was very okay. Did it taste different? Because I haven't been to this one. I'm very curious of of your
So
report.
Probably that the sandwiches are different, but the actual chicken's the same.
yeah, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same food. Like they don't have it in America. I don't think.
They have different
Mm.
kind of sandwiches. But I bet if you get a chicken leg, it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to add this to my data collection, and I'll see how it changes the results.
So you go back to Prague. Try. Might have been limited time. I don't know, but it was like I know it was like something barbecue something. I don't know. It
Yeah.
was good.
Gabe, I'm basically with this discovery that you're saying that there's a slight change. I'm on the next flight to Prague just to find out.
Go on like a KFC tour around like the world,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not opposed to that.
but do more. So, what do you do for a job besides music?
I am a high school history teacher.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a great job. It's actually uh, way more of a passion for me than hardcore is, and music in general. I love my job. I'm very grateful for um, discovering a passion and an interest in not just learning about history, but being really kind of curious about the teaching of it, and how to do it effectively. I had a really amazing history teacher in middle school for 3 years straight in what was a really small school. I only had 14 classmates for, from grade 2 to 8. And so you could feel kind of a small community of people. You didn't have to love them, but you got to see people change over time in a close way. But then I got to high school and I felt like I was a thing on an assembly line in a factory, and the teaching of history just felt very let's just kind of get this over with. This is a requirement. You got to do it just because you got to do it. There was no like skill building or hands-on learning about how to think carefully with in a more scientific way about history. And I loved that. It's kind of what I got, as I recall, in middle school, just having a debate about the dropping of the atomic bomb. And when I that was in middle school, but then I got to high school, and that type of stuff wasn't on the table for discussion. So uh, I also felt a real meaningful sense of belonging and empowerment when I was in school, in middle school specifically, but lost a lot of that in high school, which is why I kind of turned to punk rock. Um, and when I got to college, I just sort of I rediscovered a love for history because I was being taught it in a way that was more like it was in middle school, in the sense of like, history was up for debate, for reconsideration based on the evidence that you had for it. And that was really inspiring to me. And it just helped me kind of like learn more about the world around me, and to, just to find so much more of life as like a source of inspiration and thought, and stories of courage, stories of tragedy, stories of triumph, stories of fear. It just everything kind of illuminated me when I was just sort of getting back to like really reading history. I just felt like I was curious, and it reminded me of being curious about, the original singer of like Ignite or something like that. So it was just another great source of just to be curious about, to be watching the story unfold year to year, to be reconsidering how it's been told. And so history and hardcore to me have kind of always been very similar, in terms of how you can kind of engage within it. And so every day I go to work, I'm really excited, because it's an opportunity to see young people really participate in what I think is a meaningful way of of learning about history. And I get to, I get to be surrounded by, thoughts and questions, which are the things that I think for me just kind of make life exciting.
Nice. Um, so we watch history videos on YouTube when we're on like long drives, and mostly on the TED Ed channel. Have you ever heard of it?
I sure have. Yeah.
Yeah. So also I got really into geography last year, and I learned every country location and most flags.
Oh man, I gotta tell you, I gotta I gotta pump up my geography skills. I gotta do it for my students as well. It's just been I teach world history,
Yep.
and
Same like realm. It's not same, but like history is pretty similar to geography.
yeah, it's all intertwined. Geography is just like human geography is. Whew, I mean, it's very intertwined. History, so much of history is dictated on based on little lines of where a country begins and ends, and the disputes over that. Um, so yeah, I gotta pump up my geography skills. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I want my children knowing where things are. You know, helps you kind of realize how big and also kind of how small the world really is. But
Yep.
you got to have that geographical thinking in order to in, in order to really think that. And but underneath that, you need to know where things are. you need to you need to know where they exist. And so I gotta do that for my students and myself, really.
Yeah, so Half Heart is playing they're playing shows this year again. Are you excited?
I am. Yeah. I have a complicated relationship with um what it means for that band to play live. Um, I'm a little neurotic about you know playing live, especially if you're not a band that's actively writing music. I'm very uh try to be as thoughtful as I can about how you keep a culture growing. When I first started going to shows, bands didn't get back together, and it was bands also broke up. Like they didn't stick around forever,
Yep.
and there was something really powerful about that, because I just remember watching videos of 10 Yard Fight or In My Eyes, and thinking, and I remember always existing in the early 2000s, everyone was saying, "Oh, band's gonna break up, band's gonna break up," and great bands would come up, and then next thing you know, within a year or two, they'd be broken up. And so there was this kind of like urgency about what it meant to be a band when you're around, but also there was a really great band, and they were no longer around. There was this kind of interesting uh, push to be um, creative and to say, well, this band is never getting back together. And these videos of these kids, whether they're at the Anthrax and singing along to Youth of Today and Bold and Gorilla Biscuits, or just like footage of 10 Yard Fight, playing, or like Carry On. And, these bands aren't getting back together. And, I can't wait for their reunion to enjoy myself. So I got to create it myself. And I took that like wicked seriously. And then suddenly all these bands started getting back together, and I was like, this is great. I'll never forget when Bold announced that they were going to do a reunion, and then we got a phone call asking us if we wanted to play the reunion, and it was at CBGB's, and I was like, oh my God. And it was so wonderful. And the show was amazing.
When was that?
What's that?
When was that?
It was like the spring of 2005. And
CBU was closed in what?
2000,
Oh,
2006.
so you were like one of the last years for them play CBGBs.
yeah, it was a total dream come true. I couldn't believe that I think I have photos of that show. I got them right here. Yeah, this is our set at when we played with Bold at CBGB's. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
It's a real meaningful moment in my life, and as you can see, we all shaved our heads. We were so excited to play, and it was a Bold. It was one like our heroes. They were like one of our favorite bands, and like and I remember thinking like, oh, this is so great. The show was intense. Every single person in the room was singing along to songs that were written by 14-year-olds, and so it was very joyous. But then something happened. A few months later, we got asked to play with Bold again at CBGB's, but this time it was on a Sunday, and it wasn't in the spring, on a Saturday, and it was with Uppercut and our friends Guns Up. And I was like, whoa. And I really thought like this was going to be this amazing show again. CBGB's, New York, it was great that time. Maybe there'll be more people singing along. And we got there, and I remember thinking, where is everybody? And people just didn't show up. And it was a fairly like empty crowd. And I remember just sort of thinking, and it thus began this kind of like enduring wonder about what it means to be a part of the past, and then to come back and then to remain.
Yeah.
And so, and I remember Youth of Today did a reunion a couple months later, and it was so intense, and I loved every single minute. It was so great. And then finally in 2006, Gorilla Biscuits did a reunion, and I was like, oh my God. Like, we were actually on tour, so we missed the first string of US reunion shows that they did. The following summer, in the summer of 2007, they did like a couple European dates, and they asked us to play some of them, and it was totally euphoric. But then like I just started thinking about like, well, GB, and then GB went away. They went away for a while, and then they came back like in 2000, I'd say like 5 or 6 years later, and it was still totally excellent. They got the tracks for it.
Yep.
And then but I remember just thinking about that Bold show, and I remember watching other bands do reunions, and it's always like really awesome when a band comes back for that moment.
Yeah.
But if you stick around and you kind of it's possible to kind of lose the electricity of like, here we are, we're back, but we're going to like, but you know, it's momentary. And so when it comes to reunions, I'm very like I said, I'm pretty neurotic about it. I'm very careful about this idea of what it means to return and maintain the sense of urgency. Because when Bull did that first reunion, there was no feeling like they're, oh, we can just see them again. And then they came back just a few months later, and it just didn't have the same urgency. And I don't think it was a slight on any of their songs. I think that people really, when it comes to punk and hardcore, they really want to feel that sense of urgency, like something is about to go away. And that, to me, at least, is how you can kind of cultivate a really awesome, like life or death feeling, like you know, like a deathbed visitation. And that was how I came up in an age again where I said where bands kind of like they break up a lot, and nothing is guaranteed to exist forever. And there's something about that when we remember that we expire, we are not eternal, we are not going to live forever. Um, there's something very powerful about how we interact with each other in that moment. And so when it came to Have Art doing reunions 5 years ago, um, I was very thoughtful and very considerate of like, where has this worked and where has it not worked? And what are some of the things I can sort of learn from, you know, bands that have kind of come back and really seized the moment and then went away and then somehow seized the moment again. And to me, um, Gorilla Biscuits was kind of a nice model for that, um, in terms of uh, going away and never like really and like and you know and then coming back after a while and somehow maintaining this specialness that it's not really guaranteed, um to heighten the intensity of the moment, because that's really what it is when a band comes back together. It's really about the live moment to me. And so it means is that the care and the treatment that you might put into writing a record is the same type of care and treatment that you want to put into really kind of like the live experience. And so it's got to be done very carefully. It can't be willy-nilly. I've seen the bands kind of just come back willy-nilly, like it's no big deal. And it's a bit of a shame. That to me is when it feels like you're just you're kind of taken away from the present moment. And you're not even really thinking about the importance of presence, and what it means to be existing in a moment and then not existing in another one. And so, yeah, I am excited for Have Art to play, but part of me comes to it, you know, hoping that there is this feeling of electricity and urgency. You know, people were kind of miffed uh, when we, you know, the caption that we wrote was just, you know, we're not, there's no additional shows here. We just, these are just the five and that we're playing. And, you know, people were like, well, you said that 5 years ago. Well, some things had changed. You know, 5 years ago, we hadn't played the shows and we hadn't been able to have the hindsight say, like, well, we did it right and it felt magical and it felt urgent. And it also felt like we weren't taking away from the present moment because we wanted current bands to play. We kind of wanted to lift up some of the things that we thought were really strong and making hardcore special in the very moment. And so we did. And we had the hindsight feeling like, you know, we did this honorably, and we're, you know, we thought this time around, you know, it's possible to do that again. Um, and and then to just sort of see where that goes, but always with this to kind of preserve this feeling, which is authentic, by the way, uh, that we don't know if we're gonna ever play again. You know, we really don't, and a lot of that has to do with just where we are in our lives and our interests, and also with an extreme amount of honor and kind of like value for not wanting to take away from what is really alive and blooming in the present moment. All of it is very much so designed to kind of avoid the trappings of nostalgia, which is this kind of, in my opinion, like momentary mental illness of like thinking that the past is actually not past, and that the exact way of the past is happening right now, and it never is. You're always existing in a different moment than what was.
Yeah. So okay, silly question time. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
Hold on, got a bug in my. Ah. Sorry, I got a giant bug in my office. I think it's gone.
I
I've returned momentarily. I didn't get it, but it's looming.
but it's not a wasp, right? I hate them so much. I hate wasps.
I don't know, but something tells me, for your question, either way, I'm not going to survive.
If it's a wasp, you can get up. You can get off right here. I would, and I wouldn't feel bad about it later. But if there was a wasp right here, I would just walk away. Sorry, but I can't handle them. They are
Yeah.
my number one fear.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I would go with the one horse-sized duck. I don't like small things.
Yeah, probably that makes sense. Well, if you could tell your 12-year-old self anything at all, what would you tell him?
Um, I would tell my 12-year-old self to always embrace being weird, which is what.
Yeah, I like being weird.
Yeah, which
And I like doing
or
faces.
that is something that my my 15-year-old girlfriend told me when I was 15. She's now my wife and the mother of my children. So, and your mom met my my wife years ago. She was on that first tour.
Okay.
And I would tell. Yeah, hold on, I got him. Wait, never mind. Not it. Not on the outside. Anyway, I would also try and just say a little bit earlier, what I was discovering then. I would just say there is no authority but yourself, which is a concept that I gathered from that band Crass that just kind of changed my life.
Nice. Well, anything to add before we wrap it up? Can't speak right now.
No,
I-
nothing bad.
Well, then thanks to Pat for joining me today, and thanks to all of you for watching or listening. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Spotify and other streaming platforms. Until next week, bye.